Hello and welcome to Leo Say's Pantheon, a fortnightly podcast with me, your host, Leo Say's. This week I'm joined by Scott Taylor, a Nottingham-based historian and writer with a keen and insightful interest in the local history of Nottingham City. As you may or may not know, I live and grew up in Nottingham, as has Scott, so I'm excited to have a conversation with somebody who is as knowledgeable as him about the place, since it is so entwined with my own identity. Scott, welcome to the show. How are you doing? How's your weekend been?
Yeah, not too bad, cheers mate. A bit busy, been up Wilford Hill today just taking some pictures, from the crematorium.
Yeah, I saw on Twitter that you'd been up there.
Oh yeah, but yeah, it's the first time I've been up there, to be honest.
Yeah.
I suspected there'd be a dead good view, just because you can see it, can't you, from so many places.
Yeah, it's a brilliant spot, really.
Around. Yeah, it's wicked. Yeah, it's quite a nice. The building itself is dead nice as well. I hadn't really realised. I'll have to have a little look into it.
Yeah.
I like chancing up on stuff like that.
Do you live that way now then? I know that you were...
A little bit, yeah. Clifton. I grew up in Beeston, so not a million miles away. No. And then most of the time as a sort of adult, I've lived in St Anne's. And then I'm living up in Clifton now with my missus.
Okay, great. I mean, you one of the things that you want to talk about, wasn't it? Sort of St Anne's Well, was it Robin Hood Well?
Yeah.
As you called it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've just been doing something on that actually.
Right.
Do you know much about it?
Not at all. Well, the little I know about it is that it was a holy well.
Yeah.
It was meant to be a popular meeting site back in the... I'm not sure about when, but there was a chapel nearby, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's... the reason a lot of the info is dead vague, which is probably why it's quite hard to find out. But it's a bit of a sad story. Right. It's been like there's been like a well there, and it's a dead specific spot. I'll send you like the map coordinates after, but it's a dead specific spot. But there's been a well there since like medieval times,
right.
And it used to be called Robin Hood's Well.
Yeah.
I think everything in those days was called Robin Hood's, this, that, and the other. You know what I mean? I don't think there was much historical significance necessarily. No. But yeah, it was called Robin Hood's, and it was supposed to be like a healing one, like you say, and it was good for rheumatic pain and stuff. And there was like kind of a bath, really, that built like a stone bath, so that you could go down these little steps, and the water from the spring was just filling up this little tub. But there was like an overflow and everything, so it didn't spill, and people would just go down. It had like a little domed roof, apparently.
Right.
Really badly made from the descriptions I've read, but just like this dead crude like thing that people would go and bathe, absolutely freezing, according to this this one thing I read, and but it was supposedly dead good for rheumatic pain. But then years later, I guess, like as it was moving into Victorian times, they were getting a bit more health and safety conscious, probably. Right. Not as much as we are now, but sure. They just kind of fenced it off, and there was like this massive monument built over it, like it looks like an arrowhead to me, which I quite like because it's obviously Robin Hood's Well. But Christianity kind of came in and started calling it St Anne's Well, and like you say, there was a chapel built nearby, and the reason St Anne's Well Road is called that is because it connects the city to St Anne's Well.
Sure.
But it's not there anymore. It's just under concrete. It's really sad. It looks, I think the site's been sold for housing by the looks of it.
So there's no
but it's just been that way for years.
There's no chance of any kind of archaeological dig into it or anything like that now?
I don't know. There's been some. There was one in apparently 1987,
right.
Where they found, because depressingly, that monument that I mentioned that was like an arrowhead, it was just smashed up and buried underground because they needed a railway embankment there, apparently. There was a viaduct going over. I mean, the railway isn't there anymore at all, so it seems doubly sad, really, that it was kind of uprooted or covered over, to make way for the railway viaducts, and that's completely defunct now, so they don't have a railway going through there, so it's irrelevant, really. It's a shame. But yeah, I suppose there is a possibility. I've just before we started speaking, I was just putting something together, because after I mentioned it to you, I started getting a bit of a bee in my bonnet about it, because I used to have one when I lived more in St Anne's.
Yeah.
It just seems such a sad thing, I think, that it's just buried and there's just nothing really to mark it even. And it's still there, the spring, obviously. People, like locals, say that sometimes their gardens overflow, depending on where they live and that.
Okay.
But yeah, sometimes their gardens get
Right.
overflown, because obviously underground it's just a bit more random than it is up on the surface, you know.
Yeah, it is really interesting. It's almost as if it's a bit of Nottingham's history that's just lost. Like you say, there's nothing to landmark it.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture I took as well there a couple of years ago. It's so depressing.
Yeah.
I'm not one of these people who thinks St Anne's is depressing full stop. I don't really like that kind of thing, but
No.
it is a little. I can see what people are getting at when they say it, but the fact that this is there, it's dead interesting and it's dead culturally important, I think, but it's just buried. But yeah, I was kind of working on. I don't know exactly what I'll do with it, but I'm going to take some advice perhaps tomorrow. But I started putting together a little thing, just like a proposal to say, let's have a hand pump and a trough there.
Yeah.
Because that's what used to be there with the Victorian monument.
Okay.
Just something quite simple, I think, and just seeing if there was any chance of getting it funded by charitable donations, because then I would kind of get on that if the council could say, if you can get the money together, then we'll allow it. So don't know, dead early stages. I literally just was doing that like a few minutes before we spoke.
No, but it sounds absolutely brilliant, and I have noticed little monuments have cropped up here and there. So there's down near Moor Bridge, just before you get there, there's a little monument now to commemorate where the railway used to be.
Is there?
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Yeah, just because you've got all the little wooded area that goes all the way down Hucknall Road to the city hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they've actually
awesome.
made a point.
What is it? A plaque or?
Well, there's two things just sort of right next to each other. So one of them is like it looks like some kind of vehicle that would have gone on the tracks at some point.
Oh,
but there's also a signal just a bit further down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, things like that I love. There's as well, do you know, in is it Woodthorpe Grange up the top of Mansfield Road?
Yeah.
Do you know there used to be a train station within there?
Right.
I don't know if it was a park then, but there's like the front of a steam engine as if it's coming out of a tunnel at you. I really love that.
Yeah, it's like sort of back of Woodthorpe Park, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Near that sort of mansion house at the top. But yeah, brilliant stuff like that. I love. It's nice that they crop up as well. I think there's a bit more pride in, or not necessarily pride, but interest in what was here before. I think people are more inquisitive probably than the authorities think we are, you know.
No, I think so as well. I think it's important to kind of retain a bit of knowledge about local history in that respect, so it's not all just, about Robin Hood, because there's much more than that.
Yeah, I get a bit wound up. You might have seen sometimes I tweet stuff like that, because there's not that much historical basis for him,
Sure.
And it drives me a bit nuts that everything we do is Robin Hood themed, I think the Victorian era, for example, gets massively overlooked in the city, and like with tours and things. I think you can only do like tours to do with the castle and Robin Hood and stuff like this, but I think someone who actually wants the facts and figures, a tourist, I imagine they come away a bit disheartened, because we don't know when Robin Hood lived, if he lived, you know what I mean, and all of this stuff. It must be so disheartening, but they could actually go to a Victorian place like the Lace Market and have a proper walk round there and learn some like solid facts about when we became a city,
Well, I think that, when the Nottingham Contemporary opened, the way that they designed that building with it was like an homage to the Lace Market.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, so it's things like that.
The thing is, these things tend to have to be like almost covert. You know what I mean? Because that, although I love it, it does feel a bit covert. Because it's just kind of, you can't see it from a distance, and then you can a bit more close up.
I know.
But we should the Victorian bit. I think we should shout about it. And like the Fothergill Watson and everything.
Yeah.
There's tons that they could like do for a walk around or like a guided tour or something for tourists. Tourists love the Victorian era. They love Sherlock Holmes and anything we kind of export, like Ripper Street and stuff like this. That's big in America. They love all of that, and so tourists, it's just waiting for them to have a look at Lace Market and all around the city centre. There's warehouses and stuff, but they don't seem to get a look in for Robin Hood, which, although again I love a myth and all that, but that is sadly all he is, at the minute, as far as we know.
As far as we know, yeah. And I was saying earlier, he's more of a symbol, and he's quite a positive symbol for Nottingham to have, I think, from a class perspective. But
definitely, yeah.
It's like you say, it's a myth, and there's so much more that's more tangible in the history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think tourists want to photograph stuff and say that's where such and such happened when they talk to their folks back home. You know what I mean? And that, it has to be tangible. I'd love it if it was all proved, of course, the Robin Hood myth, and we had a time scale to pin it down and whatnot. But maybe that's not what it's about. Maybe it is more elusive, and that's why it's kind of endured. Something I always wonder as well, just on that topic, is how, like with Sherlock as well, just going back to Sherlock Holmes, like in the far future, if they looked back and watched like the BBC version, so they might think, is this a documentary or something? And then they might research it and then find the Arthur Conan Doyle stories and be like, well, when was this set? Was it the it's no clear picture. And I wonder if Robin Hood was just adapted because he was part of like the oral tradition. People. It was when everyone largely was illiterate, and so stories were just told around the fireside and what have you. And I wonder if he was just adapted, and that's why he kind of changes a bit in all the myths, and he mentions different kings, and I wonder if he was just adapted in the same way we adapt, like Sherlock, I suppose James Bond, Batman. They all undergo like these massive redesigns, if you like, whether it's a new artist on a comic book or a new director on a movie or whatever. They all get kind of reinterpreted. And I wonder if that was just Robin Hood, and that's why he's so confusing to historians, is because really it's just folk telling tales to each other, like to entertain each other, which in itself is brilliant, and the fact that we're still aware of him is astonishing. But I don't know, like you say, I just think more tangible stuff. If we want cash from tourists, which I suppose we do, you need something more tangible.
Yeah, I just think that's a really interesting point about Robin Hood. I've never really considered that bit. Let's go back to St Anne's Well a bit then, because
oh yeah, sure, yeah.
When do you know anything about the period of time when it was actually used as a holy well?
It was like a huge period of time. It's like 500 years.
Right.
So it's from the medieval era. There's actually documents from like 1400s where it's called Robin Hood's Well, and it's referred to as that. And then even before that, in fact, it was known as, I think it was the Ouse Well, which is OWS well.
Okay.
I don't think they're as clear on that as to what that referred to. They thought it might be this pagan goddess called Eostra, which is also where Easter gets its name from.
Oh, interesting.
Or it's the same kind of root, if you like. But so it was known, like even before it was Robin Hood's Well, it was this Owl's Well. And that was in the medieval era, so that was good. And I mean, that's a huge span of time anyway.
Presumably this is pre-Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely pre-Christian.
Right.
And then when, like you rightly said, a little chapel was built there. It was a hermitage, and that was kind of based there. One little interesting thing, just to tie two strands of like the well and Robin Hood that we were talking about. I think in one of the early Robin Hood tales or ballads, it describes him having a hideout 1 mile roughly from the town centre, and it's quite interesting because Robin Hood's Well is roughly a mile. I think it might just be over, but you never know if they went about it a different way, or did it as the crow flies or something. And that would have all been Sherwood Forest as well, which we tend to overlook, But it was medieval era and before, where it was certainly pre-Christian, when it was a healing well or a holy well.
So moving forward then in time to when the railway was built and the viaduct around that area, Was that the same line that would have gone through the back of Victoria Centre, through St Anne's, and then would that have connected up to Weirwoodthorpe Park?
I think it might have, yeah. I think it was part of the Nottingham Suburban Railway that also did Thornywood.
Right.
So there was kind of there's quite a strong local thing up in that neck of the woods then. NSR, Nottingham Suburban Railway. It's quite short-lived, but it's that's something I need to kind of get my teeth into more. But I think it might have been part of that, because that would kind of make sense from the way the tracks are angled, I think. I don't know if that did go through Victoria, actually, but... yeah, it was the one that connected it with Thornywood. There was also a St Anne's. There was a separate St Anne's station, and you can see if you go up, if you just keep going up St Anneswell Road nowadays, before you get to Mapley, on the left-hand side, you can see it's so obvious that it was a station master's house. You know, even if I don't know tons about. I'm not like a train spotter or anything, but you can just see the shape and that of it, and it just after it there's a bridge, and nowadays where the track would have been is all housing, but you can just see that this one building in particular used to be like a station, either a station master's house or, you know, something of that ilk, someone who worked at the station.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it was part of the Nottingham Suburban Railway.
It's interesting where all these old railway tracks used to be, because I used to live just off Edwards Lane.
Yeah, I know that area a bit.
Yeah, and I sort of noticed that there's a brick wall that looks like an old bridge. And,
yeah.
I didn't realise until sort of fairly recently that there was actually a train line that went at the back of where City Hospital is now through that. It's not Bestwood as such. I can't remember what the housing estate's called, but yeah, all of that was part of a railway.
Yeah, and then it goes around like your neck of the woods, doesn't it? Like up in Top Valley, because I was reading. I did a little bit of reading about Top Valley after you mentioned it,
right?
In your message, and
yeah,
it says on there that there's a bit where now I don't think that the track's not there, but it's like apparently a tree-lined walk. It says. I'm not familiar with it myself, but that would be the same. That would be part of the same thing, wouldn't it? I reckon the same network.
So. Yeah, I mean, quite possible the train line would have gone that way. The only history I know about Top Valley is that apparently it used to be a farm, and on the South Glade Field there's an old farmhouse, which I presume is probably the oldest building there, to be honest.
Yeah, right. Most of it's 1970s, isn't it?
Yeah.
How old do you think that one is then? Because I don't know that bit. That farmhouse, like really, like going back, like Victorian or beyond. Do you think?
I couldn't say. It doesn't look too old, to be honest. So
yeah,
I'm not.
But just older than the rest of them.
It just stands out. It's obviously been there.
Yeah, really.
Before.
I need to have a look at that.
Yeah.
What's that? South Glade Field? Did you say?
Yeah, it's sort of the opposite end of where South Glade Leisure Centre is now. It's sort of the other side, more towards Top Valley. It's just like a single house that's there. Yeah.
Yeah, wicked. I'll have to have a look at that. I don't know that neck of the woods loads, but you're right though. I see like these walls all the time, like normally red brick walls, or with kind of darker blue brick. That they're just at roads that you think, why is there just a tiny stretch of that red, and then it goes to railings or whatever. And often it is because there used to be a railway bridge, and the tracks just kind of. Hidden, really. Either they're hidden or they've been pulled up, Yeah.
So I've got a few questions written down, sort of like, but originally I was going to start off saying like, you've been running the Nottingham Twitter page. How long for now?
I think it must be about a decade, I reckon.
It's been a while then. Has it been endorsed by any of the official bodies in the city?
No. It's just me, basically. I've done like collaborations here and there, but no, it's nothing. There's nothing official about it, and I intend to keep it that way.
Okay, it gives you more freedom.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I don't want anyone sticking the raw in and telling me what to do and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But no, it's completely unaffiliated with anyone. It's just my little vehicle, really. To be honest with you.
What about Nottingham captures your attention so much? Because obviously a lot of people live here, but clearly it's sort of grabbed your interest throughout your life? You sort of grew up here. Yeah,
that's a good question. I think it's just biased. I think it's just because I'm from here. I'd probably be like this sort of about wherever I lived, which sounds a bit dismissive, but I just find it dead interesting. Loads of generations of my family have been from here as well, and so I don't know. I've got quite a good imagination, and I like to picture relatives like going around in olden times and stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I always think it's dead interesting that I might be going to places where they went and stuff like that, or thinking, well, what would this have been? You know, back in the day. I'm now going to it as a news agent, but maybe back in the day it was where my granddad, I don't know, went to work in an office upstairs or something, dead boring, but it's kind of, for me, it's kind of interesting. There's a sense of belonging, I think. It's dead basic, probably. I think it's just that.
I get that sense of belonging.
Because I'm from here and generations of my family have been from here. I don't know, it's just that, I think, to be honest with you. It's nothing more.
I mean, I've often, but obviously you've really sort of plunge yourself into an interest in it and do a lot of research, and for me it was more of some kind of a background thing, but there is something about the city that's always, there is a sense of pride, general interest.
I think that's true.
I know that my granddad, when he died, had tons of books on sort of Nottingham history and pictures from the Victorian era. Yeah, really interesting stuff. So you've probably heard of a lot of them, but I'll have to dig them out at some point, and we can probably
definitely
send them away or something.
Yeah, we won't be doing any interviewing when that happens. I'll just be sitting there leafing through them if that occurs. But definitely. You're right. I think as well, because we have like the two universities, I think there's always a comparison. We like people who are from here. There's always a comparison because, like sometimes people like some populations exist in a bubble, but because we've got the two universities, we don't really, and so there's always people coming in from other cultures and countries and just even different parts of the UK, and you can kind of get a bit of a parallel, and so I think that might be where some of the pride comes in, because you're always kind of, wanting to puff out your chest if someone's from some cool place, and it kind of makes you look harder in your own place. What have we got, that's comparable, like a competition, but in a nice way, you know what I mean? Not anything silly. I think that kind of, because we are connected with the outside world, with the unis, I think that does tons to alter our complexion as a population compared to perhaps a town or city that doesn't have those type of institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's got that energy about it. It's got that history about it. That's, like you say, it's not like a pride in the sense of competition as such, but just a strong identity. That's a good point, and I think that is what comes from, because if loads of people are coming in, when you go somewhere else, because I've lived in other countries and stuff, and you tend to project yourself quite strongly, like you, even if it's a bit false, you'll kind of project a bit, and you'll kind of go along with the stereotypes. Like if they're like, oh, do you want a cup of tea? I know you English people are always drinking tea. You'll go along with some bits and bobs like that. And I think when you're in a city where there's tons of people who are probably doing that in reverse because they're away from home, you tend to pump up your identity a bit, and it all kind of feeds itself. It's all kind of nice having all these different influences and stuff. Absolutely. I mean, but one thing for me, a bit of what I've got written down here, is sort of my interest in sort of the working class culture of Nottingham, and obviously the lace market, the lace industry was known for that. Alan Sillitoe, sort of profound working class writer. And even, I know that we don't really want to go too much into the obvious history about the castle and that, but, the 1831 riots, that feels really significant as part of Nottingham's cultural history.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I think as well, like, I love all of that, because I think, if I'm right, I mean, I've only got a real potted version of it, because I hadn't looked tons into that, to be honest. But I think how it came about, if I'm right, is that the Duke of Newcastle was going to vote against us having, like us, as in like sort of the working class majority of Nottingham having better voting rights,
Sure.
and that's why it was done. I mean, I might be really, really condensing probably a really involved issue, but I think that's the nuts and bolts of it, if I've understood correctly, you know.
I mean, I don't know the details
I like that.
of stuff, but it's something around that. It was only a year later that the Reform Act was put through, and it was basically about people's rights and a lot to do with tax, I think.
Was it? Yeah. I mean, it's strong action, isn't it? It's unbelievably.
Very.
You know, it's unbelievably strong action. We wouldn't dream of anything like that. The only thing really comparable, really, I can think of in my lifetime is probably poll tax riots.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was they're a bit of a dim and distant memory. But I recall that, not specifically in Nottingham. I think I was too young, but I'm sure that they happened. I remember people kicking off about it. But it kind of puts me in mind of all that type of thing. But for us in Nottingham, it's something we've been doing for, like you say, for like hundreds of years. You know, it's like old hat almost. You know what I mean? Yeah, we've done this for ages. We burn things down if we don't get our way.
Well, so I can't remember who it was or where they were from, but they were basically saying like, "Oh, Nottingham's historically known as like you stay away from it, you don't mess with the peasants."
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I love it.
I love that. Yeah, the tourist shop should sell a T-shirt saying "Don't mess with the peasants."
Don't mess with the peasants.
I would love that. I'd be the first to get one, I promise.
So I know that you described the current castle or palace, as they call it, as a shoebox.
Yeah, I did.
But we said we'd have a bit of a rant about it, so should we go into that?
Yeah, it just bugs me like that. Like, if you see, I bought this book off Amazon. I don't think I've got it to hand, but the other day, it's a dead small little book from the 1960s, and it's just a history of Nottingham Castle, and it's brilliant. Like the medieval structure. It was just awesome. It looks amazing, and it's got like these speculative sketches, and it's got some floor plans of it, and you see them around on the internet. When I was leafing through it, I thought, oh yeah, this is where that image is from and whatnot. But the medieval version of what we've now got was just amazing, and I think if we had that towering over the skyline now, like wherever you go, because you can see even the shoebox, you can see from so many different places, you know, when you're around, just because Castle Rock is, you know, obviously it's strategic, but that is like a high point. But you'd be able to see the castle from all over the show, and it'd be like such a brilliant symbol. Really but we just haven't, and it's because we let it fall to rack and ruin. In Victorian days, of all the days, you know, when they sort of did so much, and I think almost kind of were a bit backward looking in some ways. Like they really loved the medieval era apparently, and were kind of often using symbolism and stuff, which is why you get like the Green Man and things like that on a lot of Victorian houses. Just as one example, it's because they were kind of looking back quite a lot and enjoying their history. But somehow we let the castle just, you know, rot basically, and it would just had to be pulled down apparently.
Well, I think I've got a bit of history written down here because I was
cool.
Really, it's something to do with Charles I. He was sentenced to death after, but he used it as a fort in the English Civil War.
Oh yeah.
And basically, as far as I'm aware, it was demolished in 1651 when the Protestants got in charge, basically.
Oh, was it? Oh, right. I might be wrongly blaming the Victorians.
Yeah, I
don't know.
I don't know, because bits of it remain. Even I think the gatehouse is what they say is the only real and the little bit of the wall that actually remains of the original castle.
What was that? The entrance? Did you say?
The gatehouse at the front. Yeah.
I think the Victorians put cladding on that, so like what we look at now isn't exactly, although the structure, the shape of it is the same. I think underneath all of that, it's that kind of rough. Yeah. There's those rough blocks of stones that you also see. I think, do you know, behind the Robin Hood statue, there's, I think, the bits of the lower wall. Yeah. I think they might be original. Yeah. Because they're quite rough kind of rocks. that are just kind of set in place, I think. So I think some of that, but yeah, I think that must have been that was the kind of thing that led to it being not used as a. But we did. I'm pretty sure. I'll check my sources just in case I've dreamt it and I'm blaming someone on a podcast for something that hasn't occurred, or a whole generation of people. But I'm pretty sure it kind of just fell to rack and ruin, and so they just thought, let's get rid of it. Which is, I don't know. It's just awful.
I just think it's got quite a convoluted history, and it's a bit mysterious as well, I think, about exactly...
Yeah, that's a plus point in my book, but I think as well, just thinking from a tourist point of view, the fact that when it says Nottingham Castle on the road signs, there's a picture of a little castle with battlements and a kind of arrow slit window, and then when they go there, it's just a massive cube. I just think that must be so disheartening. Like, at least don't big it up with pictures of castles, because they can go to like Chester and see like some, where it's still got the castle, medieval town walls and stuff. We've got a box. Don't make out it's better than it is. I just think that's such a. You're asking, you're building it up, aren't you, just to get knocked down? They must be so disappointed, these poor guys with, Japanese folk with flashy cameras and stuff. They must think, where's the castle? Where's the castle gone? Is it behind the shoebox?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a rant, but it just gets on my wick.
On the history of the castle, I don't know whether you're aware of. I should have checked the street name out and where the exact location of it is. But in the Park Estate, because apparently the original castle sort of spanned much of where the Park Estate is now.
Oh yeah, you did mention that, and I meant to look into that more.
Yeah.
I know that the park, obviously, like the name is from. That was preserved as a kind of area for hunting for when there was like aristocratic guests and stuff, and royal guests.
Right.
At the castle, so all of that I think was just. But as far as I can gather from reading it, was wild, and so like they had like gamekeepers and stuff who kind of fed the pheasants and the deer and whatnot, but just kept them there and about, so that when the rich folk wanted to go hunting, there was plenty, and it wouldn't like. It was walled, I think, so they wouldn't stray out into.
Okay, so
it was more like a parts. On one side, it was the River Leen, which is basically along what's now Castle Boulevard.
Yeah.
River Leen went along there, so they wouldn't have needed that. But yeah, parts of it were, bricked off and that. But you get poachers apparently going in, which is quite cool, and that's like another kind of potential origin of Robin Hood, or that kind of Robin Hood spirit. That kind of rebelliousness that you kind of mentioned earlier, of just we're starving, we live in a forest, we're crappy peasants, I'm going to get one of the fat pheasants that the king's been saving away from us. So that's quite cool. I think that must have been a cool little bit of conflict between the local population and the royals.
I didn't realise that was originally like a sport, not sporting ground, but like a leisure ground. Then
yeah,
rich.
Yeah. That's where the name's from. Because like, it isn't a park in modern, times. It's all red brick in it, and but it just alludes to the fact that it's it's from. That's where it stems from. It was like a sort of cultivated or landscaped hunting ground, so there'd be gamekeepers just making sure that when the posh folk came out, there's stuff for them to hunt and that, because that was like the hobby, if you like, or the kind of thing that you do to dazzle a guest in those days.
Yeah, I mean, the spot that I'm thinking of is there's a car park just on Derby Road, and at the back of it, it's hidden away. There's a set of stairs, and they go sort of quite high up, back up to where the Park Estate is at the top. But there's a really big cavern, like an old cave.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah, that's a great spot.
But it's obviously really old, and no one seems to know the history of it. What was it? And I've always wondered, is this part of the original castle moat, perhaps? Or because it looks like water used to run
I don't think so. I think it's much later.
Okay.
I'll double check for you. There is some info out there, but I do remember that I struggled. But I think it might have just been a way to get carriages to make, because it's quite difficult to get to the park, and it was just a way, I think, to kind of make a way off Derby Road, because if you imagine it without all of the modern, because there's like a dead there's a huge building, isn't there? Like a modern, not a skyscraper as such, but there's like an office building kind of in the way, isn't there? I think you have to. I always feel like
there is now.
Security guard might come out and tell me to move on or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I think they're like
it is
now.
Public way.
Yeah. It is.
I'm pretty sure that was like a carriageway. Quite a good place, well, a brilliant place, in fact, for info is Picture the Past. I don't know if you have a look on there much.
No, I haven't.
It's awesome. I think it's picturethepast.org.uk. And what it is, it's got loads of photos from all different eras of Nottingham, Derby and Leicester, and the shires of those. And you can find almost anything on there. And if you put like Park Road Tunnel, I'm sure that's where, because as well as the photos, some of the more helpful people who've submitted things have got like huge captions with them that they've got as text on the site. Utterly brilliant, and I'm pretty sure that might be where I found the best info. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's a really like impressive thing, isn't it?
Yes.
It's just an underground. An underground cavern, isn't it? Like, but hollowed out as a tunnel.
It's just quite surreal walking through it. One minute you're in a car park, and then the next you're in this really sort of old style. I mean, it's huge. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, it is.
And it's silent in there as well. It's literally just around the corner from the city centre, and it's like suddenly you're in silence.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't know why. You see, things like that, they should, even though it's, I suppose it's not much to look at or whatever, but like they could do with an information plaque or something like that. You know, it wouldn't hurt, would it? You know,
exactly.
And like as well, tourists would love that. Again, I'm sure it's something that that people like surreal things and kind of like you say. I was in a car park a minute ago. Now I'm in this massive tunnel.
Yeah, it's a bit of an
people
experience,
like that. It's a bit of an oddity. It's a bit of a quirk.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a hidden away, really, isn't it?
What I'll do with the website you've just given me as well, because this is going to go on YouTube, I'll just put it in the description box below, so people can go
brilliant.
on that as well.
Yeah. Is that how you do the podcast then? Is it on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm putting them all on YouTube at the moment, and I'll probably look for a new platform for them as well soon. But yeah, YouTube it is for the time being.
Yeah, wicked. Is your one up there with was it in Scotland where there was a paranormal investigator, did you say?
Oh, I was going to do that recently, but I couldn't because he had a family bereavement, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we're going to reschedule, so yeah. I was looking forward to it, but obviously circumstances are what they are.
Yeah, of course, yeah. You were saying you were a bit in two minds about paranormal, were you?
I love ghost stories, and I always have. I've always been into horror films. I like hearing about people's paranormal experiences, but I'm never convinced.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I do really enjoy it.
Like I think I said in a message, I want every one of them to be true, but I'm too much of I try and rule out. I think, well, that could have been this or that could have been that, and it's not to poo-poo like the person, or the story, because like you, I love a ghost story, and hearing them from the person who they happen to is awesome. I think I agree with you, but I always go into skeptic mode. Hopefully not too obviously, but my mind is often thinking, that sounds like it could have been a noise from a cat or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's that non-dismissive skepticism which I think is important for me at least. Yeah,
that was a great way of describing it.
Yeah. But I know that you've had
to be dismissive, do you, to have an objective view? I guess.
Sorry.
You don't have to be dismissive to have an objective view.
No,
you can still kind of harbour a doubt without being, really dismissive and rude to the person.
Well, I'm a psychotherapist, sort of day job, and
oh, really? Yeah, I wondered when you mentioned about your email.
So a big part of that will be about. People have their personal experiences, and whilst objectively that may not be the case all the time, people have strong emotional experiences that it's theirs, isn't it? And nobody can take that away from them, essentially.
Yeah, and I think that's I think it can be really deflating when if someone goes, oh well, that was obviously this, that, or the other. It was obviously just a headlight of a car, rebounding. You think, I've had this story that's always not amused me, but dazzled me in some ways, and then you think, oh, someone's just coming along and being all Scully all over it, and they've ruined it for me, But I prefer it to be a bit more Fox Mulder. But
yeah.
I'll tell you one. I don't know if you've checked out my blog. It's a very I'm rubbish at blogging, and I haven't posted anything for absolutely ages. It's probably months.
I have checked it out, but I did notice that it wasn't like a regular update.
Oh yeah, I'm atrocious. I set out with good intentions, and then it's just real life, there's too much stuff to do.
Yeah.
But I put a little paranormal story on there, and it's not dead neat or anything, in as much as I don't know what it was or anything like that. But I can tell you about that if you like, because I know you were sort of fairly keen.
Because I did actually read that one. I've got it as a question. Yeah, so go for it.
Shall I? Yeah, and then if you've got anything you thought about. Well, all it was, there's a tiny little footpath in Lenton Abbey estate where I grew up, and it goes from, I can't remember, Manton Crescent, I think it is, and that's where, just as an aside, where Alan Sillitoe was born, I think.
Right.
And it goes from there into a place called Salthouse Lane, which now is more or less part of University of Nottingham grounds. It's kind of behind their Broadgate accommodation.
Yeah.
And basically, in days gone by, when I was a kid, me and my mum, if I went to the shops with her, we would take this little cut through, just to save time. And I was walking along. I think we were, as I remember it, we were more or less in silence, although it's hard to remember. But I remember I was pulling the shopping trolley, and we're walking down this little lane that I'd been down countless times before. And I heard someone coming up behind us, just heard footsteps. And as soon as I heard them, I kind of pulled over, if you like, so to make a way for them so I went behind my mum pulling the trolley, just to let them walk past. And the footsteps kept going for a while, still behind me. And I thought, what is this? Like, what are they doing? Like, are they just walking behind me, or what?
Yeah.
And so I stopped and turned round, and there was just no one there. And the feeling, it was like a sinking in my stomach, because you fully expect to see. I didn't know, I couldn't picture, I don't know, I didn't have any image in my mind of who it might be, but there had to be someone there in my brain. There was just no one there, and I paused, and my mum had turned around to see why I'd stopped, and she saw that I had a rather terrified or whitened face or whatever. And she said, "Oh yeah, that happens to me down here quite a bit." She knew. I don't think I even said, I thought I heard footsteps, and I stopped and turned around. I think she just said, "Oh, no, that's happened to me
like
down
she
here before."
Acknowledged it, like implicitly, without saying anything.
Yeah, really strange, And I think I might have put in that blog post that even if it's just an acoustic weirdness, even if it's just someone walking nearby, and it's kind of somehow sounds like it's right behind you, I still think that's brilliant, I think that's as exciting as a ghost.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like everything's set up in that area potentially for that kind of acoustic resonance to occur, which is creepy. Yeah, it
really is. Years later, weirdly as well, a girl who lived opposite me, I was on Woodside Road, and she was as well on the opposite side of the road. There was always talk that, and I don't know how much of this is just childish sort of bravado, that something dragged her into a hedge there, and I don't know what nothing happened to her, but she said, "Oh, I was dragged into a hedge there," which again, I've no way of corroborating or anything like that, and I don't know her now.
I was just interested.
It might have just been a child thing.
When you'd put that post up, if anyone had been in touch and said they'd had similar experience.
No, depressingly not. I kind of hoped they would, though. Or I hope they'd go, "Oh, it used to be an old Indian burial ground," or something.
Or something like that.
Completely out of place in Nottingham. But, I think that's the thing with ghost stories. I always want to know why something is happening. You know what I mean? And I think I wanted people to let me know that it used to be X, Y, or Z. I've looked on an old map as well. Another good website you might know, because I bang on about it a bit, is Insight Mapping.
Right.
I can't think of the URL off the top of my head. It's a bit convoluted.
I'll try and find it and I'll put it on the description.
Yeah. Even if you just Google Insight Mapping Nottingham, because what it is, it's got it's a modern street map essentially. It's dead up to date, but what you can do is there's a little slider on it, and you can choose historical.
Oh, wow.
As one of the sliders. Okay. Another one is like satellite. It's much like Google Maps in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a historical one, and if you choose that, I don't know how they've done it. It must be, I don't know if it's like an individual who's done it, or if it's kind of all done on an algorithm or something. But they've aligned all old maps. So what you can do is you can pop a little red pin or something on your modern map if you're curious about something, and then have a look back at years gone by and see where that red pin is now. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or was then, I should say. And there's absolutely nothing on that little ghostly lane that where that occurred. There's nothing. It was all fields, much like your neck of the woods as well. Lenton Abbey was all just fields before the hordes like me sort of all moved in, and it became a housing estate. So I don't know. There's nothing particularly, because I always think it must be something. You always think a ghost is like a sort of something resonant from the past or something.
There, it doesn't seem
there's nothing that jumps out. But I don't know. It's just one of those curious things, like you say. Sometimes there's just no knowledge. It might even spoil it somewhat if I did find out something.
Well, sort of on the ghostly theme then, but not really. But obviously Nottingham's known for its cave systems. I remember a few years ago, I was in Broadway Cinema. It's probably about a decade ago now. But they had a presentation on in the bar, and it was like 3D scans of the cave system.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I know those. They're brilliant.
The ones from they go from the top of Peel Street right down to Shakespeare Street at the bottom. So
that's right. Yeah, I had a look into them because you mentioned it in a message, didn't you? I had a quick look into that. But yeah, sorry, go on.
Well, I wondered if you had any information about what that was at any point. I think you mentioned like a sand mine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I thought that's what it was, and I've looked it up, and it was.
Right.
I must have read it at some point. I'll send you the info over because it's dead interesting.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
It sounds dead weird, doesn't it? Like a sand mine, because I don't know. Really kind of, or I didn't know why that would have been needed, but I read a bit about it, and what it is in the days before carpet, so we're going back a wee while. I think it was a sand mine in the 1700s,
right?
In the days before carpet, you would just have wood or stone floors, and so that you could keep it clean, you would put sand all over the shop, and it was so that, I suppose if someone came in with mucky boots or whatever, the sand kind of collects it, and then you can sweep that out, and then put it back on at a later date. You know what I mean? It's like almost like a temporary floor covering.
Yeah.
And people also used it for cleaning because it's pre-detergent and whatnot. So for a harsher thing, you could, I guess, use this kind of sand, because the stuff under us, the rock under us, just isn't really useful for building. You know what I mean? And so they just kind of, too soft and crumbly. And this particular one that you've highlighted, they're generally just called the Peel Street Caves, although I know what you mean. They stretch so far, you could call them a number of things. They were run by a guy called Rouse. Let me just get his full name. I think it's James Rouse.
Right.
Sand mine from about 1785, it says on here 10,000 tons of sand were mined from it in the years. I mean, they say mining, it's dead easy. I think you just literally just smack a pick into the wall and sand drops down, I think. But they have to here and there put pillars, because obviously it's not safe just to go into a hole and start digging.
Well, two things about it that really surprised me, because my dad sort of lives off Birkland Avenue, which is literally opposite the entrance to it. And for years and years and years, we'd walk by it just not knowing what this door was. I thought it was like an electric box or something. But it goes down into these caves.
It's kind of a very... it's almost a Soviet-looking kind of door, isn't it?
It
It's
looks
kind
like it
of
could have
very
been an old shelter
council
or something.
thing.
Yeah, definitely. These caves, they have, I mean, I can't remember how many levels it had. It must have been about 6 levels that go down. It's quite shocking, really, that all of that is below that estate. It's really,
it really is.
Quite spooky.
I think it says on this little book that I've got, which I'll send on to you, or I'll send you the details of it. It's an awesome book. But it says that while James Rouse, I think he was a bit cheeky. He kind of expanded massively underground,
right?
Because it was a bit kind of legally, people wouldn't go, hang on, you've just dug under my pub or whatever, because they wouldn't know, basically. So although he only had rights to the land, on the surface or whatever, or directly beneath the surface, he just used to dig willy-nilly and get all this sand out from under other people's properties, which I suppose, I don't know if that was their right or what, but it was dead expansionist, and he'd kind of chance upon people's cellars and things. So here and there are bits that are bricked off and stuff, and it's a really higgledy-piggledy site. I've got a plan of it on the screen here, and it's so higgledy-piggledy, and it's because in places he's just kind of broke through into someone's cellar and stuff like this, or they're under, they've got a little basement, or a pub's got a cellar, and he's kind of accidentally tunneled into that, and so it's a really odd shape, and a lot of them are kind of incomplete, basically. He'd obviously branched off and not got anywhere. Perhaps he died before it. But I mean, it must have. I don't know if it was a money spinner for him. I guess it must have been, because I guess you don't put Endeavour in like that, do you? If it's not kind of paying for itself.
It's pretty big. It must have been making money from it at the time.
Demand huge, absolutely huge.
Carpets must have been quite a big industry at the time.
Yeah. Massively, and cleaning. I think as well, people, because he would charge for it, and apparently this was quite good quality sand, which seems dead odd. But there was common land as well in those days, and so you could just go out with a pick. If it was common land and there was a bit of kind of sandstone, you could just go in and get a bucket full of sand or whatever. But obviously this guy's doing all the work, or his labourers are doing all the work for you. In this case, so it's kind of it was a more convenient way to do it, and I guess the common land probably got ripped pretty quick in terms of people taking the sand and stuff, you know what I mean? So this was kind of a guaranteed way, because he had, I presume in his head this was a system. I mean, I'm looking at it now and it's a real I can't really see any system, but you never know, once you're down there, maybe to his mind, he had a plan possibly.
Yeah, it looks a bit random and a bit chaotic down there.
It does, yeah. So I've seen as well, I think it's only just now I'm thinking of it, but do you know there's a big furniture shop on one corner of Mansfield Road. To me, it all seems dead overpriced and outrageous stuff.
Guy Phoenix one near
it might be, that sounds
Victoria
familiar.
Bus Station.
It's like metal giraffes that you're obviously never going to have in your house, and they cost £600 and stuff. But
I think it's closing down as well.
If you go a bit up from there, there's that. It's set back from the road, and I think it's called an International Community Centre.
Yeah. And
then the next building along, I can't think what that is. It might be a studio photography place now, but there's two big wooden double doors, and I've never thought much about them, and I was going up there one day and I saw a guy who must work in one of the buildings had kind of pulled up really close to them, and then he got out, opened them up, and just as I was walking by, he drove his car in and it just disappeared underground, and I looked down and it's a really steep incline, which I guess they use it. But just looking at the plan of these James Rouse sand mines, it must be part of that, because I can see Mansfield Road on here and I can see North Sherwood Street, and I reckon that might touch some of that, because he just it seemed so steep the way he was going down. I don't know if it's just my memory of it, if I'm embellishing it or something.
Make sense,
but it was amazing.
Yeah, it would make sense.
And you just don't know these things are there, do you?
Well, it's like there's a whole network of space underneath Nottingham, isn't there? That's practically unexplored, really. By
Yeah,
cave
yeah.
thinkers.
I always read this thing. Oh, there's no network. It's just individual caves, and I kind of wonder if that's true. And I wonder if perhaps that's just put out there to stop us investigating, because I think you might have some urbexers um, having some fun under Nottingham if there was, because there's always rumours of these networks. Um, and you get them all over the country. There's always talk of an escape tunnel that, like in the days when like priests were persecuted, you always kind of get, oh yeah, there's a tunnel that a priest used to use and it runs from such and such to such and such. Sure. And they're always like really far apart, and you know full well there's a river in between them, and you think, well, how would that be? But there's always those types of stories in Nottingham. I spoke to like this Irish guy in the Peacock once, one evening, and he said he used to work with his dad at John Player's in Radford. When he was dead young, his dad was like sort of normal working age. Yeah. And one evening his dad said, oh, I'll show you down like this tunnel. And he claims to have gone, he said he was walking for ages, and he said there was like lampposts in there and stuff. Like it was a really, it was facilitated. It wasn't like a rough, it wasn't just like a cavern he was clambering through. And he says they came up some steps and that, and they came up in rock cemetery. Wow. I mean, when you think about the expanse of that, he was absolutely certain, he was absolutely adamant that this is what had occurred. And I mean, I don't know if it was spot on, if his memory was spot on or what, but that's a hell of a distance.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Because I know Rock Cemetery does have, because that used to be a sand mine as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. Right. Okay.
Yeah, and there was even windmills around it, like around the forest recreation ground as we know it. There was like windmills, and I think they might have been used for like grinding the tougher bits or something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, and so I can kind of imagine it, because John Player famously has there's kind of a service road under John Player's that connected two of his factories or two of his buildings.
Yeah.
And don't know, Rock Cemetery's got all these caverns, and I don't know, it somehow rings true. This man said he was amazed when he came out. He couldn't believe like the distance he'd gone. Yeah. His story just rang true, to be honest. I don't know if it's just one of them where I want it to be true again, and so obviously I'm kind of going to put that bias. But he was absolutely adamant.
I didn't realise the official story is that it's not a network; it's just individual caves. Right? Okay.
That's absolutely the story, or the official line. Right. You'll even read it in things. Do you know this? I'll send you like a copy of this book, like electronically, but it's clearly been done with the help of the authorities, and that's brilliant, and they're clearly allowed. But it says almost up front, word for word, that this same thing that I've read in so many other things about the caves, that the first thing to say is there's no network of caves under Nottingham. And I sometimes wonder if they say, yeah, look, we'll give you access to X, Y, and Z, but please just put this disclaimer in. And I don't necessarily mock that, because it might just be for health and safety reasons, because you would get people, even people like with good intentions, or perhaps homeless people or something, and the next thing like someone's passed away down there or something, or not been found for years. But it is an exciting prospect, but I sometimes think the reality is normally the opposite of the official line, is my sceptical belief again. So I do think that there's a few others as well. I'll try and dig them out, but there's always something from Rock City to somewhere else. But I can't think of it now exactly what that one is, but it's another outrageous distance, the one that I've heard where it kind of comes up more or less at Rock City. And I just don't know. I guess if everyone was working the cellars, though, because that's basically what it was, like the people would just think, well, we can have more space. This floor's dead easy to dig. I'll just make myself more space, and that's what I suppose. If everyone did it, then yeah, why not?
Things could have potentially linked up more than we're aware of. I mean, cellars in old pubs probably. I mean, I'm thinking about the Malt Cross. It goes down quite far, doesn't it? And
Oh, I'm ashamed to say I haven't been in it, but yeah, I need to. Have you been inside them?
Yeah, about a year ago. It's not a network by any means, but it's something that they're still exploring as a potential to sort of linking up to different places. And
Blimey, yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, you're quite right as well about pubs. I went. I was allowed to go down in the into what used to be a beer cellar, I guess, under the Falcon.
Right.
This was a couple of years ago. My mate knew the owner at the time, and it's not easy to get down there. You have to kind of duck under this. It's kind of not just a door, basically. You have to kind of scooch down through this funny little. I wouldn't recommend it for claustrophobic people. It's like a little trap door and stuff, and you have to go down there. But when you get down there, it's quite big.
Sure.
And next door is, or not more or less next door, is the Sir John Belay's Warren.
Yeah.
To the Falcon on Canning Circus, and you could clearly in days gone by just walk through to there, but it was all bricked up now. And on the other side it was all bricked up, and that intrigued me because that would take you then to the general cemetery. So I like you wonder about this, and I like to think that there is a network, although like I say, the official line is always that they're not connected, and it's silly to think so, but that just makes me think more. Yeah, it probably is. Then if you're telling me not to think that, then I'll think it all the more.
It makes for that mysterious element to Nottingham as well. I think what's down there, and there's still something along the lines of there is still lots to explore. So
yeah, I think that is true, definitely, and I think there's lots of cases where if a big building project is happening and they find a cave, I've heard sort of unofficially that they might not necessarily declare that because there's then going to be they have to put a hold on everything because it might be a site of historical interest. And so what they tend to do is just brick them up or cover them up as much as they're able to. So there are a lot that are potentially under there still, under this, it's hollow ground potentially. But I presume obviously the foundations have to be safe, but so long as it's structurally sound, they'll just cover it up. If it's just like an offshoot and the building is structurally sound, they'll just move on and forget to mention it to the superiors.
Yeah.
I think the elite in the elite buildings, that really nice building on Upper Parliament Street.
Yeah.
I think when that was built, because that was just waste ground in the 20s, I think, when these guys first bought it, and then they kind of looked at building it into like the massive sort of complex it became before it was divided up. And they found underneath there's a huge cavern, and they had to extend the foundations further because the foundations as they planned them would just go into a cave basically, and so they had to then extend them. So under there is probably quite an interesting site. This huge cavern with like a massive building foundation sort of protruding through it, but they had to take it down sort of to solid ground.
Wow, very interesting stuff. Well, we've come to time, Scott.
Brilliant.
Anything else that you want to add quick now?
No, I'll think of something as soon as we've finished speaking, of course. But no, it suits me to sign off.
Yeah, brilliant.
All right, brilliant. Well, I'm sure we'll chat again anyway, mate. We'll catch up with some of the things that we've spoke about, because you've set me thinking about some other stuff. So
I've already got something else. I'm thinking about the statue that used to be outside the Royal Centre of the lady. It's like a spaghetti statue, but maybe we could do it. Do you remember it?
I've completely forgotten that, but I do remember. I think I just used to mock it, which makes me feel really sad now because I'm supposed to be this like aware of the past and culturally, all that's kind of what I've kind of become on Twitter. But I think I just used to mock it.
Yeah.
But what happened to her, spaghetti lady?
No idea.
I'm going to launch it. I'll do it on Twitter. I'll launch something tonight. We'll try and find out what became of her.
Cool. All right then, Scott. I'll catch you soon.
All right, mate. Take it easy. Nice talking to you, Leo.
You too. Bye.